Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about all things that help you grow an amazing culture, both at work and at home. I'm your host, Kristina Schmidt, and today we're going to start a two-part series on two key elements that all leaders need to master in order to get the most from their team. So today, in series number 1, we're going to talk about the first element, which is trust. In the next episode, we'll talk about the second key element, which is empathy. So for those of you on YouTube watching this, you may notice my setting looks a little different. It is summer and the boys are home from school. And so on Mondays, which is when I record my podcast sessions, I get to go to my co-working space. And so we won't have any guest appearances when I do them here. So we're going to give it a try this week and see how it goes, see if we like recording at the co-working space. It's the Atrium. So if you're ever needing a place to work in St. Thomas, amazing place called the Atrium. So come check it out. It's gorgeous, wonderful work setting. So today we're going to talk about trust. So I want to go through defining first what trust is, why it's important, and then I'm going to give you 3 tips on how you can start to build it with your team. Now you might be saying, Kristina, of course trust is important. Of course I'm honest. Of course I'm trustworthy. But one thing that we have to remember is that without really trying, whether you're talking about a separation between leaders and team members or even customers and clients, there's an element of trust that needs to be built. So every relationship is a relationship that we need to work on within our business, and we have to build trust. And the quicker we can do that, the quicker we can have a more effective team, a more effective employee, or we can build trust with our clients and have more, better results for our business as well as their business, depending on what your business is. So what I want to get into is first just defining trust. So obviously trust it's that feeling that you get when you know someone is effective or good. So I'm going to read to you. I'm going to read to you what the dictionary actually says, because they can define it a little bit more eloquently than I can. But basically, it's that firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something, or it's to have faith in someone, to kind of use another word around it. So having faith in people, having faith that your boss is going to do the right thing, having faith that your employee is going to do the right work, or they are trustworthy in general, or that your client is going to live up to their end and the person you're buying from, so your supplier, is giving you the best product or the best service that meets your needs. So those are all elements of trust and what it really means. So Stephen Covey has an amazing book called The Speed of Trust, where he talks about 4 different elements of trust, and he has a tree in there. And so I actually had this in my first version of Cornerstone, but I took it out because there would have been too many trees and it got confusing. So I put a tree of like wounds in there in the second time around. So they're both very valuable trees. So this is the other tree. But there are 4 elements if you think about a tree. So just picture a tree in your head. And trees have leaves or fruit, or they have something, right? They also have branches that are going to hold those fruits. They have a trunk that, is the basis where everything grows, and you get all your nutrients flowing through it. So it's a pretty big structure, obviously. And then there's obviously roots that go in deep, and we can't see the roots. So thinking of trust along these lines. So your leaves and your fruit. those are the results that you see. So when we think about trust, one element, and probably the easiest element to gain of trust, is the results. So someone trusts that you're going to deliver the results that they want, or to have a productive result in your work. So that's the first element of trust. So easy to see, pretty easy to gain. You do a couple of rounds of work and they get results, everybody's happy, right? So that's a pretty simple one. The next is the branches. So depending on how thick the leaves are, so how many results we're getting, your branches might be a bit harder to see maybe, or maybe they're nice big branches and we can see them. But either way, slightly less visible is kind of the thought around there. And so the branches would represent the capability of the person or the thing, right, that you're trusting in. So capabilities. So we can see results, we can see capabilities pretty easily too. Again, you might want to see a few more renditions of somebody delivering positive results, or seeing that they can grab something new and they can take it and deliver a result. And so you can see they're a capable person, capable of functioning, capable of delivering those results. And so the next part is the trunk. So we don't really see what happens inside the trunk, but that's where like the key things happen. And the outside, that bark, that's like that protective layer. So that's protecting the whole tree as well. So when we think about that part of the tree and relating that to trust, the trunk is like their intent. So intent can be a little bit harder to get after when we talk about trust, but it's huge. I like to think of, like, when you think of sales techniques or even leadership techniques. So you can do all these things to build relationships, and you can, offer a compliment, or you can give a small gift, or you can be very, engaging with the person, asking lots of questions. So those things are all great practices, like in sales, as well as in leadership as well. So those are great practices, but if the intent is good, if the intent is there and it's good, then they don't come across slimy. Right? You don't feel like a slimy salesperson when you're doing them. But if the intent is, I just want them to buy, then it can come off slimy. But if I'm selling something and my intent is I legit just want to help people, then my intent is good and everything else serves well. So it's almost like that bad intent makes the whole tree sick. I'll tell you a story about a tree, actually. We had this tree in our front yard, and it was huge. It was like an old maple tree, and lots of beautiful branches, but you could see some were kind of dead, as happens in a big tree. It needs pruning periodically. But the trunk of it was covered in carpenter ants. So what that actually means is that inside the tree was dead and sick. So the carpenter ants don't make the tree dead. I learned this from somebody who's, a pesticide specialist. The tree does not start dead, or the ants don't make it dead. The tree starts dead, and then the ants come after the dead, rotting wood, because they like that. They like to eat that. So by the nature of the fact that even though the tree kind of looked productive, its intent, it was sick inside. So you can kind of say, hey, the tree looks good, but something had gotten it sick. And so that intent part of trust is broken of the tree. Okay, we cut it down because I was getting ants in my house. And so therefore we solved the problem, but you can't cut people down, right? So anyway, I digress. And then that last part is the roots. So the roots speak more to like the value system of the person you're trusting. So this is where integrity comes in. So all of these elements build in trust, and you can have trust in some of it and not in other parts of it. But if we really want to have trusting relationships, we need to allow people to see our whole structure as a tree in order to build that. And we want to be able to see theirs in order to build great trust. So why is trust, even down to the root level, why is that so important in leadership? Well, first of all, I want you to think about somebody you trust, like implicitly trust. How do you feel about them? Just take a second. You can pause me if you want, because I'm not going to leave dead air, but go ahead and hit pause. Think about someone you really, really trust. How do you feel about them? when they tell you something, you're like, oh yeah, I can believe that because I trust them. When they say and they give you feedback on something, you're like, yes, of course, I take their feedback because I know their intent is good. I know they have good integrity. I trust their perspective and they're capable of giving me this great feedback. So there's a huge element of it versus somebody you say, well, I kind of trust them. And when you don't fully trust them, they could give you feedback and you can say, well, I kind of believe it, but there's this element that I don't know about. So I don't know if that's good feedback or not. So maybe I'm going to take that with a grain of salt. So now taking that into a leader employee sort of relationship, when you have that element of questioning and judgment, do they know you're serving them well as their leader? Does your team know that you're making decisions with the best in mind for the team as well as the business? Or are they saying, they're just after the money, here they go, throwing us under the bus again as employees? So there is a lot of element of distrust there because we don't always show all of our tree trunks and roots, right? So when we have trusting relationships, people feel safe. They feel safe to take risks. They feel safe to say, I'm struggling. And that is all critical and important on a team, because when we can fully feel like we can be vulnerable to our employers or to our leader, then we can really make good results. Because when you can say, hey, I'm struggling today, I'm struggling with this assignment, I'm struggling with this client, I'm struggling in general, when you can say that, then you get help. Versus saying I'm struggling, they say, well, you must not be any good, and throwing them out, right? So I'm going to hold another podcast about like that element of when people are struggling and what we do with that. But in this level of developing trust, it is a key element for having that strong relationship. And strong relationships are what build strong cultures. And strong cultures are what deliver strong results and repeatable results, which is what we all need in our business and at home, right? Because our goals at home are the same as our goals in a business, which is to be productive members of society, to create children that are going to eventually be productive members of society, to love one another, which is an effective result. So these are all great results to be having, and we need them both at work and at home if we want to be functioning at our best. Anyway, soapbox done on that part. But trust is critical, and growing it takes some work. So I'm going to give you 3 ways that you can improve trust. I'm going to relate them to our tree trunk example. All right, so the first one is easier, right? Because I'm going to talk about the trust of the leaves. So what can we do to build a little bit around like the trust around the leaves part? So the results. So giving people so that they know they can trust our results. So very, very simply, do what you say you're going to do. Sounds simple, but isn't always easy. I know from my perspective, I want to do all the things. But in order to effectively do what I say I'm going to do, I have to be careful not to overcommit. So that is something, if that's something you struggle with, then that might be the goal around growing this type of trust, is saying, I have to be realistic and I can't say yes to everything, even though it might be a great idea. I can say not now or whatever it may be, but not overcommitting so that you can do what you say you're going to do. And so that's just a really simple way. If you say yes, let your yes be yes, your no be no. And if you say, yes, let's implement this thing, then implement the thing. And if you can't implement the thing, then say, I don't have the time or the wherewithal to implement the thing. Maybe get a team working on it. So delegation, go back to my last podcast to learn about delegation. But doing that is that first element of trust, because if basically if you have grown a culture of where your people's suggestions fall on deaf ears, or when you say yes to something, people are like, well, we'll see if they really do it. So you don't want to have that. That is not going to build trust with people. That is going to continue to break the trust, and that will have big effects on results and your ability to have big asks of your team as well. So second thing we can do, this one is going to get a little bit down into the intent section. So thinking into the trunk section, okay? So one easy, quick thing you can do, and I know I say this for everything, but this is because it is so useful. Just do a team working genius assessment, do a team workshop. You can do a self-assessment. You can bring somebody like me in, you can do it with your team. But when you do that, you give people language to feel okay about the things they're not good at. So you relieve a lot of guilt from people, but you also relieve a lot of judgment of others. So when there may be a team that has a lot of strong tenacity, so that bottom implementation half of the working genius. And then you've got somebody in there who's a great inventor, but has very low tenacity. So they're going to struggle with the same things that most of the team is actually really good at. And what that causes typically when we don't have a language for it is it causes a lot of judgment against that one person, even though that person has probably brought great value in the inventing side of it, because they don't execute very well or they don't finish their tasks. A lot of people are like, man, they're worthless. They never get anything done. They have all these ideas and they don't really put anything out there, and they never finish, and we always have to clean up all their work. But when you have words for it, when you can say, oh, well, that person just has a frustration of tenacity, and therefore when a project gets to that point, we're all going to jump in and help because we're all really good at it, but we need his invention because none of us have it. We're all frustrated by invention, and so we don't come up with any good ideas. He's the best problem solver of the group. He just struggles to implement the actions from the solutions that he invents. So you now start to appreciate people for what they are and who they are and what they bring to the table as part of the team. And you start to stop judging them, but start to say, oh, they're so valuable in this area. Or, and just having that language is going to open up the doors for trust, and that trust of intent. So when we think that somebody's not finishing something, we tend to call them lazy. We tend to say, oh man, they're out to lunch, they don't care, right? And so now we're judging their intent. And when we can give language around and reasons around people's intent, and we see, oh, it's not their intent that's doing it, it's just kind of who they are, and they need help. This is an area they need assistance. And that's okay. Having assistance and getting assistance is okay. Again, that's that other podcast. Okay. So the third thing that you can start to do to build trust, and this is even a great one to build trust with someone where it may be broken, where maybe you've had struggles. But this one is start to have those difficult conversations. So a lot of people shy away from difficult conversations. So like feedback conversations, talking about a misunderstanding, talking about kind of like that elephant in the room where maybe it's a judgment you had, right? We struggle with those things because we think they're going to damage the relationship. But I would say if they're done well, 99, and this is a made up statistic, so I'm sorry, but so many times it will actually help the relationship, not hurt it. So when you can have an effective feedback conversation or an effective discussion about something where there's a disagreement, you're actually going to grow that relationship. And that's because you're getting it out on the table. So you're stopping having those conversations in your head about, oh, who is this person? Why are they always fighting against me? Why are they always, why can't they see it from my perspective? So you're having these conversations in your head and you're imagining that people are acting a certain way. But when we have the difficult conversation and we do it effectively, we actually get these things out on the table. We start to understand why this person thinks this way or how they really feel, not just what we're seeing. So we're digging deeper into that intent side and even a bit into the integrity roots portion because we're starting to understand their perspective. And that is huge. And another thing that's going to help is in the next podcast, but having empathy during those conversations and understanding that when we're having these difficult conversations, it's not always about convincing the person that my idea is right, your idea is wrong. That's usually not the goal. It's usually to have an understanding. Our goal is to understand, not to be right. And when we can have those difficult conversations where that's our mindset around them, they can grow a relationship enormously. You can take a leap in a relationship after that tough conversation and really start to build some strong trust bonds through that. So that one's a little bit harder. And if you would like a quick guide to help you have that conversation, I have a great freebie on my website. I will put the link down in the show notes, but it's a great freebie. It walks you through how to prepare your mindset first before you have the conversation, and then prepare your language around it. So I say first the mindset because you have to build that empathy part, and I'll talk about empathy in the next one, but you have to build empathy to have trust. So it's a big part of it. So you build that empathy up and you get your mindset on right, and then now you can use the language around it. And we also have an entire course where we really start to build in those relationship elements and how to deal with it when we get those protective behaviors around there too, because they will come in. They will come in a lot. But getting through and breaking down those protective behaviors and creating that safe environment, that's trust. That is part of trust as well. So if you found this podcast helpful, if you enjoyed it, I please ask you to share it with a friend. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment, like it, subscribe. If you're on a podcast app, leave me a review and help to share the word with others, because again, my goal in this is to spread knowledge so that we can create positive workplace cultures, because I just want people to enjoy going to work, because when we enjoy work, we can enjoy our lives and we can do what we're meant to do on this world. So again, if you liked the show today, please share it with a friend, like, subscribe, leave a review, leave a comment, and I will see you next time on the Business Building Blocks podcast. Thank you for listening to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about all things people and organizational wellness, because quality people and processes are at the heart of every successful business. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to hit the subscribe button so you know when new episodes are released. You can also follow me on Instagram at KristinaSchmidt.ca, where I share real-life tips to help in your leadership and life journey. To get one-on-one and team support with your leadership development, book a discovery call on my website at KristinaSchmidt.ca. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.